David Nakamura is a White House reporter for Washington Post. He joins me now. David, we heard the president today. He was asked about whether this feud was having some sort of an impact on his agenda, and he said he didn't think so, that they're well on their way into making tax cuts. Do you think that's true? Is it having an impact on his agenda? Well,
it remains to be seen, but they have narrow margin on tax reform right now, and some people speculate this feud with Bob Corker could get in the way of that. I don't know that Corker would change his position on something as significant as tax reform just because he's in a fight with Donald Trump. I think the bigger danger here is, over time, I think Republicans have refrained from openly criticizing the president in too strong a way. But now you have an outgoing senator who's basically feels free to do so. And this sort of name calling is not just damaging for domestic priorities, but as you just played some tape, we have a standoff with North Korea right now, an escalating a war of words between the president and the leadership in Pyongyang. And Corker has a lot of foreign policy chops, and he said some very damaging things about this president. And that's also, I think, something to alarm allies and others around the world.
I want to play you, David, some more sound bite. This one is from former chief strategist Steve Bannon from last night.
What you saw what Corker said today is what they talk about on Capitol Hill. That's when I left the White House. Remember, I said, I'm going after the Republican establishment, and we're going to go after them. We're going to challenge. There's a coalition coming together. There's a coalition coming together that's going to challenge every Republican incumbent except for Ted Cruz, whether it's Utah, Wyoming, whether it's in
Orrin Hatch in Utah.
Orrin Hatch in Utah.
Corker, we know, isn't running for re-election. What are you hearing from establishment Republicans, David? Are they concerned about this?
Well, I think it's concern, not just what Steve Bannon's saying, although he's certainly a force at Breitbart to continue to sort of rail against the conservative establishment. But what happened with this special election in Alabama, I think, alarmed the White House, alarmed Bob Corker and other Republicans who are concerned about challenges from the right. And, President Trump continues to play to his base. But we already see, this week, the White House late Sunday released these immigration principles, which are pretty hard line, I think, as a play to the president's base. And he has apparently, according to reports in our paper and others, been concerned and expressed frustration about not really be able to continue to talk to his base. And you see the president now, I think, in these feuds to continue to fan support among his supporters who like to see him disrupting the establishment. What that does to his governing agenda, though, is the big question. And there's more and more concerns from Republicans that there's been no big accomplishments 9 months into this administration.
You mentioned no big accomplishments. So many people worried about North Korea. There's a lot of things brewing when it comes to foreign policy, the Iran nuclear deal. Do you think this back and forth with Rex Tillerson somehow undercuts Tillerson's ability to deal with these foreign policy issues?
Absolutely. I mean, he's the Secretary of State, and, whatever one might want to say about Tillerson's efforts to downsize parts of the State Department, Tillerson also has been active in trying to use diplomacy to continue to, he said just on a trip a couple weeks ago to China, that the U.S. continues to sort of probe for direct communications with Pyongyang to maybe sort of de-escalate tensions. Trump then went on Twitter, it was very angry, and said, don't waste your time, Rex. And again, this sends mixed messages to allies, to rivals, and it has left, a sense of uncertainty within the administration about how serious the president is about using all levers of the American government to try to find a solution that does not lead directly to some sort of military confrontation with North Korea.
Do you think Tillerson sticks around, David?
It seems hard to believe that this trajectory is sustainable for the long term. There's already been, speculation about various names from Nikki Haley to others who could potentially be a replacement. Those people have batted that down. And so far, Tillerson, of course, came out just a week ago or so and made that public statement saying he never thought about resigning, despite reports that said he did. But he did not directly say he had never called the president a moron. And that has continued to get under the president's skin, as we saw with the interview yesterday.
At the same time, the White House also released this list of immigration demands, which could impact efforts to protect dreamers. And some Democrats are threatening a government shutdown. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, so we heard yesterday that members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus were very blunt yesterday in saying that in their mind it's on the table for Democrats to use the spending bill to try to force a better immigration agreement to protect these so-called dreamers who will be had their work permits relinquished under President Trump's plan to end this Obama program, DACA, that had protected them. And Nancy Pelosi said, wait, she cautioned, we're not at that point yet. We don't want to go too far right now because we're still looking for room for compromise. But again, those immigration principles the White House released on Sunday for what they'd like to see in a bill to protect these dreamers included building the border wall and hiring thousands of more ICE agents and cracking down on sanctuary cities, things that Democrats say are non-starters. So you're already seeing Democrats now saying we might try to force their hand with the spending bill, which could potentially, and we're a ways from that, lead to maybe a threat of a government shutdown.
Has the White House reacted to these threats? You know,
I think the White House is saying, as far as they're concerned, they laid out the terms of the debate in their mind, and it's up to those in Congress to move forward. I think there's some who say, look, it's up to now House Hill Republican leaders to say where they stand. Do they stand with the White House on these sort of harder line demands, or do they see some middle ground? And I think that's the next step.
All right, David Nakamura, thank you for joining us, David.
Sure, anytime. Thanks.